is differently, the water of the causal ocean is differently situated than the covering water of the universe. The water that serves as covering for the universe is material, whereas the water of the causal ocean is spiritual. As such, the watery covering mentioned herein is considered to be the false, egoistic covering of all living entities, and the gradual process of liberation from the material coverings, one after another, as mentioned herein, is a gradual process of being liberated from false, egoistic conceptions of the material gross body, and then being absorbed in the identification of the subtle body till the attainment of the pure spiritual body in the absolute realm of the kingdom of God. Srila Sridhara Swami confirms that a part of the material nature, after being initiated by the Lord, is known as the Mahat Tattva. A fractional portion of the Mahat Tattva is called the false ego. A portion of the ego is the vibration of sound, and a portion of sound is atmospheric air. A portion of the airy atmosphere is turned into forms, and the forms constitute the power of electricity or heat. Heat produces the smell of the aroma of the earth, and the gross earth is produced by such aroma. And all these combined together constitute the cosmic phenomenon. The extent of the cosmic phenomenon is calculated to be diametrically, both ways, 4 billion miles. Then the coverings of the universe begin. The first stratum of the covering is calculated to extend 80 million miles, and the subsequent coverings of the universe are respectively of fire, effulgence, air, and ether, one after another, each extending 10 times further than the previous. The fearless devotee of the Lord penetrates each one of them and ultimately reaches the absolute atmosphere where everything is of one and the same spiritual identity. Then the devotee enters one of the Vaikuntha planets, where he assumes exactly the same form as the Lord and engages in the loving transcendental service of the Lord. That is the highest perfection of devotional life. Beyond this, there is nothing to be desired or achieved by the perfect yogi. So again, today's verse is Canto 2, Chapter 2, Text 28. Tato visesham pratipatya nirbhayas inatmanapo nala murtirat varan jyotirmayo vayum upetya kale vaivatmana kam brihad atmalingam. Translation. After reaching Satyaloka, the devotee is specifically able to be incorporated fearlessly by the subtle body in an identity similar to that of the gross body. And one after another, he gradually attains stages of existence from earthly to watery, fiery, glowing, and airy until he reaches the ethereal stage. Okay, so I just want to preface everything by saying I don't have a lot of realization to really speak on this verse and what Prabhupada elaborates on in his purport. It's pretty much my first time coming to this knowledge here, reading up to this point and reading the specifics about what happens when the devotee is passing through the material universe and passing his material body. So this is the first of that I'm reading these the vivid details that Prabhupada and Srila Shukadeva Goswami is giving us in the Srimad Bhagavatam. One thing that I can comment on is um, the I don't know if you the concept of changing from gross body to subtle body, how at this stage you're no longer in the gross body like we know it that we have right now, but at this stage you're in a subtle body. One thing that I've heard about that is in a class given by uh, uh, His Grace Radhe Shyam Prabhu. He was speaking about the basically the opposite of what we're talking about, because right now we're talking about Satyaloka and the highest of material planets, and Radhe Shyam Prabhu was speaking on the lower planets, on the hellish planets, and how in those planets it's described that we are also in somewhat of a subtle body, or at least, yeah, in his class he was explaining how we're also in like this somewhat of a subtle body, um, because the the punishments that are being incorporated there, this kind of burning, this all these very, very, very extremely painful situations that we're put in when we go to these lower planets, they wouldn't be possible if we had a gross body. Our gross body wouldn't be able to endure the pain and the suffering that happens in these lower planets. And so we're put into these kind of subtle bodies so that we can withstand the pain and continue withstanding pain. So this is highlighting the highlighting what we don't want to do and where we don't want to go. And when we go to the lower planets, it's again due to the opposite of what we're reading here, that if you're going down, that means that we're performing sinful activities and our lives are full of sinful activities stemming from wanting to satisfy our senses. Um, that's usually that's the root of it. And so if we don't want to go down and we want to go up, then Srila Shukadeva Goswami is giving us the process here, and he's telling us what happens once we come up into these higher, once we come up into the highest planet here, Satyaloka. So that's really all I can say here. Yeah, if anyone else had any comments or realizations they wish to share. Hare Krishna Lavanga Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I had to keep my camera off for a few minutes, but are you able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So, because I wanted to understand this chapter a little better, I've been doing some research, and yesterday I found a video that has a whole like overview discussion of this chapter. So I just kind of started it, and apparently he started with giving an overview of chapter one and how it's talking about the process of like bhakti. But then he says, then the person in this lecture says there are some people that still like they're into this mystic yoga process. So then it goes into explain how like the mystic yogi gets further purified. So I'm thinking what this is all kind of referring to is one who gets purified through the path of mystic yoga. But um I haven't finished the whole lecture yet because it's very, very like long. So when I do, I was hoping to have it all done so I could give some more insight on this chapter this week because I had been confused about whether this is someone who's practicing like bhakti directly or this is like a more indirect process because you never hear like pure devotees going through all of this. You know what I mean? You just hear about like the airplanes coming down and taking the pure devotee up. So next week I'll have a little bit more insight. But um, what I can say is I can kind of comment on what you're commenting on. That you're mentioning the hellish planets, how you have to kind of be in this subtle body to be able to withstand the punishment. So in the same way, we can kind of see that when one is gradually going up, they're not being punished, but they're going through different kind of levels of purification. And also, what was mentioned in that lecture is that there are those that want to they ultimately want to go back to Godhead, but they want to experience other stuff first. So it appears here that this yogi, because he's going to Satyaloka, and it mentions him going to these other realms and living here for long. So it appears that he's going through different places to get different levels of purification, experience different things. But anyway, so we can see just how like in the hellish planets you're experiencing different levels of punishment depending on where you're at. So as you go up, you have to have different levels of qualification. And this is true really for anything. I mean, even if you want to live in certain countries, you have to have different levels of qualification. And not every country will just let you come. Like if you want to go, at least I know this was true a few years ago. If you wanted to immigrate to Holland, they didn't allow dual citizenship for certain countries. So therefore, then you had to give up your citizenship for particular countries if you wanted to move there. So in the same way, it appears, it's talking about the yogi becoming more ethereal. You're having to give up certain things to get to other realms or gain certain levels of qualifications to get there. So although that's probably about all I can add to this verse at the moment. But next week I'll be able to explain it hopefully more clearly because I am doing some research.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to hear from hear from a devotee who's giving an overview of what we're reading. Yeah, it's really helpful when we're hearing from other senior devotees who they've been studying this for such a long time. They can actually grasp the overview, they can grasp the essence of it, and then give it back to us in a way that we can start to understand too. So yeah, thank you for taking the time to do that. And I think that was a nice example too, with going to another country and giving up the giving up one citizenship for the other, which which is what's being described here is what we're having to do. We give up our citizenship with the material world to gain our citizenship with the spiritual world, and we get our visa there. One interesting thing though, I think if I recall or if I remember right, this is the first time that I'm seeing the word devotee in the verse specifically. I don't think that had ever been in the verses that we've been reading. So, and Prabhupada also, he brings up devotee in his purport, which makes it more confusing because, yeah, I think we had all, or at least me, I had been under the impression that this was a yogi who was uh, practicing a mechanical process to attain liberation and ultimately Vaikuntha Loka. But I guess it seems it's a devotee who's doing it, and he's still doing it, the mechanical process, but with a hint of devotion. Um, yeah, I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, I'm trying to remember because I remember in this lecture there was some chart
Mm,
that he put, and I haven't studied it, but it was talking about like the yogi, like they're doing this process, and they're basically because yogis are into like the paramount form, you know, and so they're devotees to a certain extent, but it was mentioning how sometimes there's devotees that have other desires or they're
mm,
not ready to go directly to the personal form of Krishna. So they have to meditate on the Virat Rupa and get further stages of purification,
yeah.
which is what we mentioned, which is what it was talking about previously.
Hmm.
But yeah, you're right. It does mention devotee here.
Yeah.
So that is a little bit confusing. I need to do some research into that because is it like devotee like bhakti yogi? Because if it is, like okay, well, if it's a pure devotee, then how come they're going through all this? Or is it devotee used in like a more loose term, like they're, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And so,
Well, yeah, Prabhupada says something really, he says, in the first paragraph, he says, one who has attained the place by dint of Virat or Hiranyagarbha worship is liberated along with the liberation of Brahma, which I think that's what we've been thinking is happening. That the process or the person, the path that Srila Shukadev Goswami is speaking about is that. But then Prabhupada goes on and he says, but one who attains the place by dint of devotional service is specifically mentioned here in relation
mm,
to how he can penetrate into the different coverings of the universe and thus ultimately disclose his spiritual identity in the absolute atmosphere of supreme existence. So we're not talking about someone who's going to the Brahma Jyoti or just getting mukti. We're actually speaking about someone who's going all the way to Vaikuntha.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, they're going all the way to Vaikuntha from this process. Um,
yeah,
yeah, but it just appears that I guess from reading all the other verses, they're going to Vaikuntha, but they're going like not directly.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
anyway, it's something to do some more to do some more research on, and I'm really sorry for everybody listening that I can't explain it perfectly at this moment. But I have more questions than answers.
yeah, yeah. It did remind me of one thing too, where I think the closest I remember in the Srimad Bhagavatam speaking about this, I mean, up to this point, in the first canto with Maharaj Yudhishthira, if I remember right, when he's leaving his body, it 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 um it gives almost like a step by step, not to this stage. I don't remember it mentioning anything about a subtle body, but it talks about him. I think we read it all together too, about him putting his attention into his mind, and then his mind into this, and then this into that, which uh, yeah, it just made me think of it just reminded me that this has this process has kind of been touched upon and with Maharaj Yudhishthira, and he's a devotee. So he's
Right.
a yeah, and so if this is something kind of being touched upon with him, then um, is this the process for all devotees or yeah
Right. Yeah. Do we all eventually learn? Do we all eventually go through this? It's the interesting
mm,
thing. Or is it only like some devotees? Because you
hmm
hear different things happening. Um.
yeah
So
just because it's hard to believe. I would think it's hard to believe in Kali Yuga that this is like Krishna would expect this from us, that we're I don't know. I guess I would think that this is something that a very elevated personality would know and be able to accomplish. And um, what about the other 99% of devotees, or maybe not that high, but other devotees who maybe don't have this kind of knowledge? Yeah, I guess yeah, maybe it's just one of those things that if you can, then Krishna is he takes it, but if you can't, then Krishna's not going to reject you either.
right, right, right. Anyway, to
Yeah,
be continued. To be
yeah,
continued. We can speak according to our level of realization at the moment.
yeah,
and and I guess we can also figure out how to put this in question form so we can send it to Manav Maharaj. See what
yeah.
yeah.
That's a good idea.
See if he can give like an overview of, what's going on. And because it appears from the purports that this is devotional service.
Hmm.
But it's just like because this devotee is going to different places, like is this more of like an indirect way or
Hmm.
anyway.
One
Okay.
last thing, sorry, one last thing is that I remember with reading with Jainanda Prabhu's departure, that there was a devotee who asked Srila Prabhupada that if Jainanda went directly to the look of Vrindavan or to the spiritual world. And I'd always heard that Prabhupada says that, Prabhupada said Jainanda has gone to the spiritual world. But in this that I read, it was like I guess a conversation or out of or like one of those Prabhupada Leela little snippets or something like that, I think that I read. In this conversation, Prabhupada specified that if he said, well, if Jainanda had some a little some hint of material desire, then he's gone to the higher planets to I don't know if he said to enjoy or whatever the case, but he's gone to the higher planets to I guess fulfill that kind of material desire, and then from there he's going straight to Goloka. If I remember, that's what he said that he made that kind of if that was there for him that he made a stop and then he's going straight there, which falls in line with what we're speaking about here, that there is this kind of maybe there is this kind of step depending upon our heart and depending upon our desire, we make maybe like a pit stop before we head directly to back to the spiritual world.
Yeah, I've heard that too. That's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up. So it
Hmm.
could be like a pit stop.
Yeah, yeah. Which I mean, that's how Prabhupada pointed it out, that it's not like he's going there and then he's coming back to these lower planets. He specifically mentioned he's gone to the higher planets and then, or he may like if that's what his heart was, then he's gone to the higher planets and then from there he's going directly to the spiritual world. Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't know, Yamuna, if you wanted to say anything, or you could start on the next verse.
Hmm. Hare Krishna. Well, in reality, this is new to me, these details about the ascension of our spirit soul through the different type of, gross body, subtle body. It's all new to me, but the only thing that I would add is just to reinforce what you're saying is that each one, cada cual, each one will only be able to go as far as one's consciousness is aware of or open to. You know, we can't expect someone who has no conception whatsoever of what Krishna Loka represents. We can't expect them to just arrive there. There has got to be some kind of process. And, if the person just understands the Virat Rupa, it could be that they don't even get beyond that. And that at the time of their passing, that is sufficient for them. That's the karma of their lifetime. They made it, connected with the Virat Rupa. And so who knows that's going to bring in the next lifetime. So that's all I would like to add. Um, if there are no further comments, I guess I could go on and read text 29.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
All right. Garnana Gandham Rasana Vairasam Rupam Cha Dristya Svasanam Tvachaiva Sri Trena Shrotrena Kopetya Navogunatvam Pranena Kakutim Upayati Yogi. The translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada. The devotee thus surpasses the subtle objects of different senses, like aroma by smelling, the palate by tasting, vision by seeing forms, touch by contacting, the vibrations of the ear by ethereal identification, and the sense organs by material activities. Purport. Beyond the sky, there are subtle coverings resembling the elementary coverings of the universes. The gross coverings are a development of partial ingredients of the subtle causes. So the yogi or devotee, along with liquidation of the gross elements, relinquishes the subtle causes like aroma by smelling. The pure spiritual spark, the living entity, thus becomes completely cleansed of all material contamination to become eligible for entrance into the kingdom of God. Repeating the translation, the devotee thus surpasses the subtle objects of different senses like aroma by smelling, the palate by tasting, vision by seeing forms, touch by contacting, the vibrations of the ear by ethereal identification, and the sense organs by material activities. So as we see, this is part of this process of moving beyond our gross bodies, I guess, into our spiritual bodies, because we have to leave behind all the things that are like keeping us attached to the material world. You know, this is a process that you know, if when one dies, you know, I have read, like in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, for instance, that the senses leave us one at a time until at the end, the last sense is the sense of hearing, which is why it's important that there are devotees around you chanting Hare Krishna or whatever it is that pleases you to hear at that time. So so this is what we're talking about here, leaving behind all of those connections to our material existence and just totally becoming absorbed in our spiritual progress. I open it for the others to make comments now.
One thing I was thinking about too, as an extension of what we've been speaking about, that it's really nice how personal the process is, how maybe this isn't the path for everyone, because then we read about Narada Muni attaining his spiritual body, and how in the Srimad Bhagavatam it describes that it was like lightning and thunder, that it was like a flash, that he was in his gross material body, and then just like that he was in his spiritual body. And there's no, at least from what I remember, there was no um elaboration about him, Narada Muni, having to go through these processes. Yeah, at the time of specifically at the time of his death, it doesn't mention that. And maybe in another, uh maybe in a different text it describes it, but from, at least from what we read, it gives the impression that just like that, he got his spiritual body very, just in a flash. And so uh it, it by extension, it seems that depending upon our own, yeah, like we've been speaking about, but depending upon our own consciousness and our own heart, our own desire, we have different, um, what would you call them? Almost like different rites of passages before we get to the spiritual world. Maybe for someone, they have to go through all these different relinquishing of the senses, and uh subtle, Prabhupada says subtle causes. You have to relinquish the subtle cause, which is really deep. So that could be the process for some. Maybe for others, they don't, that actually isn't required. And it would make me think that it's not required because in their lifetime they've already relinquished these things, that they're so, it could be that a person is so fixed on Krishna and loving Krishna, serving Krishna and his devotees, that he's already gone through these things in his living state. So that's something I want to ask. I want to put in a writing form, is that are these processes that Srila Shukadeva Goswami, are these things that we can relinquish while we're still living in our gross body, or is this a process that one has to undertake only at the time of death? That's something I would want to ask. And that's all I have.
Well, this raises questions for me too, if we're going to make a bunch of questions for our next session, because here at some point in the purport, and I'm sorry that I don't find it exactly here, but it said that we would enter into the spiritual world in a body like that, in Krishna, as a form of Krishna. And this is very confusing for me. I mean, of course, the biggest question being that if we are to enter into a into the spiritual world in some kind of subtle body, would this subtle body, how would this be the body that we had at the time of our death? Maybe somewhat, would this be the body that we had in the prime of our youth? Would this be, would we be like reborn as a baby in the spiritual body? Or,
Hmm.
how is it that we enter into, this type of spiritual body, and
Yeah.
beyond what is said here.
I
Maybe
remember
another.
asking Guru Maharaj, I think I asked him that question, and I don't remember, unfortunately, I don't remember the full answer, but one thing I do remember him stating is um, that we grow up to the age that we're going to stay at. It's not that you continue growing and you get older, you get old. It's like you're almost, if I remember right, it's like you're born, I don't know, I don't want to say like a baby, but you're born in a stage before your final stage, but in the spiritual world you grow to this, say you grow to be 14 and then you stay eternally 14. At least that's what I remember his response being. But
Yeah, that's
it
fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating. Uh,
mhm.
Mother Lavanga, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, again, go look over in Vrindavan at least. I do know that the like the gopis, like they're all the age of 13, 14, but they keep that appearance. And Krishna also, he keeps the appearance of being a teenager. But then there are like older gopas and older gopis, and they look a little bit older in appearance, but I'm not exactly sure how old. But I've also heard this as well. But there's also, because you mentioned getting a form of Krishna, there's also a type of liberation where one has the same form as the Lord. So, like one could, and particularly I've heard this referred to as like on the Vaikuntha planets, they have like a Vaikuntha form. But and so that's, I can't remember the type of liberation with the name in Sanskrit, but there is that specific type of liberation as well. But for one who goes to Golok or Vrindavan, then they have like a two-handed form, and is not necessarily like Krishna's form, but it's a form of like or it could be, unless you could be like a blade of grass or a tree, but assuming that you get a body, um, then you get like the normal two-handed form. So
Yes, fascinating.
Or a frog or a cow or a
yeah,
flower.
or like yeah, something like that, or rock or
A rock,
the
yeah, that's true.
dust,
Yeah.
because you're waiting for Christian to come trample on you. Yeah, because everything's alive in the spiritual world,
Hmm.
and in Golok or Vrindavan at least they don't have like innate objects. At least when I've heard.
I wonder if there's clouds. Maybe
Yeah, there's
personality is
clouds because
oh, there's
there's clouds here. So
oh, that's true. Yeah, you'd be a cloud then. Wow.
yeah. But
Yeah.
I've also heard like the people that are like trees and things like that. They were like they had a certain process in their previous life, and then they became trees and go look for Vrindavan. So
Mm.
in terms of like what what relationship one develops, because trees and things like that are in the relationship of neutrality. So when you're practicing sadhana bhakti, um, you can you can go from Bhakti sadhana bhakti to Raganuga to Bhava to Prima. And through this process of Raganuga is where you will get the desire, like you'll start following in the footsteps of a particular inhabitant of Vrindavan. Although internally you're still doing all your sadhana, but internally you're cultivating that. And you know you're following in those footsteps of the type of relationship you're trying to develop, and then you can go to Prima through that. But Raganuga is optional. So for those that want to go to Vaikuntha, they don't that their eternal relationship is with Lord Narayan. They don't go through Raganuga. They just do Vaidhi Baba Prima. So so it kind of all depends on, you know, what our relationship is with Krishna, and that gradually comes through the process of practicing sadhana bhakti and through following the instructions of the spiritual master and getting purified and such.
I love hearing the details of what we go through, what we experience, or what this process is. It's just so amazing the level of details that we can read about, and it's so that not so so nothing is a mystery, and we're kind of left up in the air about, oh, what's going to happen here, or what's going to happen there. We can actually read about it and get an understanding. And then again, this is more emphasis and more what do you say, more um uh I guess you could say emphasis, like more of
Reinforcement,
an, yeah,
reinforcement.
reinforcement, yeah, more like a more of the reinforcement of the need for the spiritual master, and how the guru is giving the instruction and giving the elaboration. I know in the and then that uh and there are situations too where there could be like a shiksha guru who expands on this kind of raganuga, or a deepening of this bhakti that we experience. I know when Guru Maharaj he's written the book on uh, compiled the book on Shamananda Prabhu, and how in Shamananda Prabhu's own life he had his Diksha Guru. I think it's Sridai Chaitanya, if I remember right.
Yeah, you like Chaitanya.
Yeah, and then he had his who instructed him to a certain level, and then he himself gave Sridhar Chaitanya Maharaj gave the instruction to Shyamananda Prabhu to seek instruction, guidance from Jiva Goswami, and it was Jiva Goswami. It was Jiva Goswami, right? I remember.
Yes, yes, from what I
Okay,
remember.
yeah, and it was Jiva Goswami who uh gave the instructions or the details of it was like a kind of like a deepening of his bhakti, and thinking like the rasa of a Manjari, if I remember right. Um, so what am I explaining here? I'm ex just elaborating is all. Just elaborating is all on the process that we all going through, and like Lavanga Prabhu was mentioning, how if you want to, you can take this step. You can either turn left, or you can turn right, or you can go straight. And so if you want to jump into this kind of uh this raga nuga stage, that option is there for us. And uh and and the details are listed out for us in different shastra, that we can actually read about the process. And then of course we have the instructions of the guru who who can um who can give us the instruction in a way that we can actually understand it and actually live it and continue on in our process back to Krishna.
Yeah, in the case of um Shamananda, I had heard a lecture on this not too long ago. He actually was developing a certain mood in bhakti. So therefore he was put under the instruction of Jiva Goswami. So sometimes this can happen if one is developing a certain mood, then a Shiksha guru can help further guide them in that.
Yeah, it seems like in all stages we're never left alone or never left in a place of mystery, that if we want that we can get the answers and we can get the instructions.
Yeah, yeah. Krishna never, he never leaves anyone and leaves anyone behind. He's always, willing to help us, with whatever type of process we're going through. And because we're all individuals, all of this makes sense. You have those who are very attracted to the Virat Rupa, which we were just reading about. They're not ready for this personal form. Okay, Krishna says, okay, you can meditate on that form. You can see me like that. You can see me in nature. And then there are some that want to go directly to the personal form. They're not really into the impersonal form. So then one can also do that as well. And then we have our process in Kali Yuga because we're really unable to perfect any mystic yoga because you have to go to the forest, and sit and do meditation and do different pranayam and asanas and things like this. You can't really do that in this age because you don't have the same peaceful environment that you had in previous ages. So therefore, we're giving the chanting of the holy name because that's about all we can really perfect, and even that's kind of hard for a lot of us to chant perfectly. So wherever one is at, there's always some process by which one can further elevate themselves. So it all kind of goes back to there's no impediment to Krishna consciousness. You'll hear this over and over again. There's always something somebody can do, always some place that you can start. And it's just reading about this whole thing with the yogi. It's reminding me of the verse that I read in Bhagavad Gita, chapter, I think it's in chapter 12, the chapter on devotional service. Hold on, let me find it. I have it right here. Let's see. I can get out of Shrimad Bhagavatam and pull up Bhagavad Gita. But Christian talks about a more indirect path. And
when he talks about sitting on, like finding a secluded place and sitting on I think he says the deer skin.
Yeah, but he's talking about not necessarily a direct path where one is worshiping like Krishna in his personal form, but he's saying he's talking about those who are into like more of an impersonal thing. He's saying they at last achieve me, but that process is very difficult. But at least like there's hope. If really one is into that. So the point that I think I'm trying to make here is that it might be a more indirect process, it might be a direct process, but Krishna is giving everybody opportunity. But according to our conditioning and our desires and things like that, we might take up one or the other. But and of course, like if you're taking up, especially in this age, a more impersonal path, you're gonna have a longer way to go. And it's gonna be more troublesome, like Krishna describes. But at last, he said that they at last achieved me. So I mean, Krishna, he's very merciful. So just like we're reading here with the devotee, like Prabhupada says, I noticed in Yamuna's verse he uses both devotee and yogi. So maybe this yogi devotee, they're not going directly back to Godhead. Like they're making pit stops, but they're getting purified to enter the kingdom of God because they're sincere and they're staying on their path and things like that. So in the same way, I've often heard it described, if we also just stay on the path of Krishna consciousness, if we don't give up the process, no matter how whatever challenges we may go through, we also will get purified. So,
We're really fortunate as practicing devotees that we get this broad overview, that Srila Prabhupada has given us this broad overview of what's happening and how and Krishna's role in it all. Because we Prabhupada is explicitly telling us again and again that this is all coming from Krishna, all these different processes of liberation and processes of attaining um attaining liberation, attaining the spiritual world, that these are all stem ultimately from Krishna. We have that. We're really fortunate to have that knowledge and that awareness, because for someone who doesn't have that, they may think, they may think that liberation is the all in all, or that merging into the light, that's the all in all, that there is no, and that I mean, I'm not sure exactly what the thought process there would be, but if the light is all in all, then you would think that the light is the origin of of this yogic process, or this spiritual process that you're practicing. You would think that you wouldn't have an awareness that there's actually a person behind even the process that you're practicing, this process that you that's bringing you to an impersonal conclusion. There's a person behind this impersonal process that you're doing. And without that awareness, without that knowledge, you can just go on about your spiritual practice as it is. But we're really fortunate because we can have that understanding that Prabhupada gives it to us right from the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, that this is Krishna. Krishna is in control. Krishna is doing everything. Krishna's the origin of everything, including these different spiritual practices, which, with having that knowledge, can make him more attractive, because you can see his personality, and you can see his kindness, his compassion for all of us. That, yeah, like Lavanga Prabhu was mentioning, that he doesn't leave anyone behind, that he adapts and he accommodates everyone's desires, no matter what they are.
yeah, it's very beautiful when you kind of look at it like that. You realize, oh yeah, Krishna's really sweet.
Yeah, yeah, yes. I don't know,
Well,
Yamuna, if you wanted any,
yes,
yeah,
I
closing
just wanted
comments.
to add that at this point, it must be that that one is um, as you said, that one can get only as much as one can understand. If one can't understand any further, they can't go any further at that moment. But the path goes on, even if it's in slow motion or rapidly, or from one life to the next, or whatever. So I mean, a lot of it has to do with faith. You have to believe that you are going somewhere, and a lot of these, this past, the first verse we read today, for instance, was full of a lot of numbers that one has got to take on faith, because it's here in the Vedic literature. Whereas on the other hand, if the scientists were to say something like 80 million miles, we might question how he could possibly know it by terms of science. But so we do have some information here that we have to kind of digest, like just through faith, that the path that we're following is the correct path, or at least the path that we choose to follow. And so that we will believe, everything that is said even these little details about, the covering of, being 80 million miles and those kind of, those details are not the important, it's like saying it's just a very big amount, right? But we do have specific numbers here. And so a lot of it has to do with faith. And, so this is, I guess it's kind of a question of mine too, because on the one hand, we don't take science without proving. On the other hand, we take some facts in the Srimad Bhagavatam without proving either. The only proof we have is that it's been repeated over and over and over again and come down, from divine source. So with that, anybody can respond to that because we're getting close to the end of our meeting.
Yeah, that could you oh yeah, how we accept sometimes we don't accept science without proving, but we accept some things in Shrimad Bhagavatam without proof. Um the best answer I would have for that is I think what Prabhupada kind of mentions in Introduction to Sri Upanishad, how um the Veda, and I know this is probably not a very satisfactory answer for one who wants like physical proof of something, but he was mentioning how with the Vedic knowledge, because it's Shabda Praman, it's coming down from Krishna in a disciplic succession. That and he's also explaining how the Veda is his mother. So he's saying there are things in like the Vedic injunctions that they're just kind of accepted. Like this is a type of knowledge that's just accepted as it is. It's like, and he gave the example how I think I mentioned this last week about the cow stool, about the cow dung, how it is purifying and it's antiseptic, but we just kind of accept that. Nobody knows really how. And so, with the Vedic literature, he was saying that one has to kind of accept in that way. And I've also heard that as we get purified, these things become more and more revealed to us. But also, Prabhupada explains in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita that to read this book, one needs to first theoretically accept that Krishna is God to get the benefit of it. So it's like you had to have at least a certain amount of faith in the beginning. So a lot of these things in the Vedas, we can't prove them directly. Prabhupada is just kind of willing to accept them because in the culture, anything in the Vedas is just accepted as absolute. But with that said, there have been certain scientific discoveries that seem to back what's in the Vedas. And I'm trying to think of one in particular, but I do know that, okay, this is I guess, yeah, maybe this would count as a scientific discovery. I was having this conversation with Bukunda last night because we have this book that about UFOs and life on other planets that Sadhuputta, I think, wrote. Oh my God, I can't remember the name of it. It's an older book.
The alien identities.
Alien Identities.
Wow.
Yes,
I've been wanting to read that. That's amazing. Okay.
And so, he came home with that book last night, and the devotee gave it to him. And I was having this discussion with him because I just saw a video about how the U.S. government is using now different technologies to try to get information on UFOs. And basically, for years they would kind of come out and say, these aren't UFOs, we don't know what they are. And now, within the past few years, the government has actually admitted that, okay, yeah, maybe, yeah, okay, there are these unidentified objects, or there is some evidence of extraterrestrial life, which we hear about in the Vedas, there's life on every planet. So, there definitely is. You can kind of now they're coming out and saying, okay, yeah, there are these UFOs. Of course, they won't say for sure they come from other planets, but there are these objects that were just like, how in the world are they, flying the way they're flying, doing what they're doing, things like this. And so we're having this discussion about how, the Vedas tell us how there's life on other planets, how like we're not the only planet with life. So there even appears to be some material evidence for this.
Okay. Well, thank you. I don't know where if there's any last closing remarks before we
Oh yeah,
finish.
and also one other point. We know that in the Vedas that it describes how there's been life for you know thousands and thousands of years ago, longer than what actual science say is the time that humans have existed. But at the same time, I can't remember that devotee's name, Drew Karma. He has proven that there is scientific evidence that humans are much older than what modern science says there is. But he kind of, I saw a presentation from him that, whenever someone finds some discovery like this, they disregard it because it doesn't go along with what the current belief is. And so it's also important to know, and I'm not a huge conspiracy theorist by any means, but what I have heard from other scientists is that there's a lot of money back into the current belief systems, and that to so there and that to change and that to totally change this would kind of really blow the paradigm. So
Yeah,
a
and
lot.
that's not a conspiracy theory to say that, Mother Nalanga. That's not a conspiracy theory. Don't internalize what other people may say about you, because that is not a conspiracy theory.
Right, right. I'm just kind of saying this to let people know that I don't just, accept everything I read, but in terms of the scientist, and, this is my discussion with other scientists, other people in the military, that there is money and things like this, back in a lot of the current ideas. So even they have told me that science is not necessarily science anymore the way it's being practiced because they won't necessarily accept your research if you're finding something contradictory to what their paradigm is. And sometimes what they're finding is closer to a Vedic model, like in terms of dating human beings and bodies and things like this, seeing that, okay, we're actually much older. There are these ancient civilizations, you know, but it's not accepted. So, yeah, we're taking Shrimad Bhagavatam on its word. It comes from the authorities, and Prabhupada says, that's how we should accept it. But at the same time, we should understand that there have been discoveries in the scientific field that are that go along with what the Bhagavatam is presenting. But it's really hard to get that out there because of the way things are working.
Hmm.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go on that long. I
No,
apologize.
no, no. They're very valid points to bring to the discussion. So thank you for bringing them. It's tying it back into like modern day reality and how it connects with what we're reading and vice versa. So thank you. Uh, again, just and it just further reinforces why it's so important for us to continue reading because if we go based off what the modern paradigm or modern agenda is, we lose out on on factual knowledge that's not really available. And for us, we're fortunate enough to have the real truth, which is Srimad Bhagavatam and Vedic literatures. So I want to thank you all very much for joining, for adding your realizations to our discussion. Anyone joining online or seeing online, or if you want to, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to add something, which is for all of us and anybody else who's watching as well. that we are forming questions, but it's each one of our own responsibility to put our questions into words in the chat, so that we can encourage Manunatha Maharaja to give us a class at the beginning of January. Could be January 3rd, but let's get each one of us get our own questions down, including those who are listening and have questions as well. It could be on this material or on other material, you know. So thank you.
I'm on
Yes.
it today.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for the reminder, Mother Yamuna.
Thank you, Yamuna.
Hi. So thank you all very much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila
Jai.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Srila
Bye.
Narasimha Maharaj ki jai. Nitai
Bye.
Gaur
Hare Krishna.
Premanande.
Hari Hari Bo.
Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripasindubhya cha. Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo. Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Wait, whose turn is it to lead next week?
Um,
Is
I
it
think it's
Mine.
your
yours?
turn.
Mine.
Okay.
It's be
Okay.
mostly reading because those purports, the next two purports are very long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The 3 pages long.
We think we've only been doing 2 verses, so
Yeah. Well,
that's our pace anyway. So
okay. Happy Bol.
okay, Hare
Hare
Krishna, everyone.
Krishna.